Yeah, I'll tell you guys.
Might be a little awkward. My back texting
You
you
got
guys.
an email.
Yeah, so we're just trying to.
Based
Yeah,
on
Michael
Joe
Meeting.
Biden's plan. A bunch of us got it, but we got an email yesterday. They reached out across the country to every laboratory they know of that handles virus testing, asking about additional capacity. So part of the president's plan to get children back to school across the country, they intend to, I'm not sure how, because it doesn't make sense to individually contract, but they intend to contract every single laboratory to help put children back to school. Right, exactly, which is a very smart thing. So we got an email yesterday. I replied to that, that sort of thing. But I thought that was interesting because if you're not in that circle, you wouldn't know. Right. So let's see what ultimately the president does. We've got a molecular test uses saliva specimen, stick it to. Right. We can test that extractive thing. But we've also got I've got maybe a little over 1,000 folks under contract across the country that actually collect specimens. We were in the specimen collection business anyway. Right. Corona made that much more difficult. But I think now, right, we're a year past, we've got PPE, we've got all these other sorts of things. Healthcare workers seem to be preferential in the inoculations and everything else. So I think we can start to put the mobile network back to work because our folks collect specimens. They always have.
I think they can hear because I got the microphone there. But either way,
I didn't. So that's going to be a positive. I don't know if the city benefits in any way out of South Pole. South Pole's position is always live and testing it.
Virtual.
Mark, that better than oh, okay. Well, yeah.
We're on
the South Pole.
The first time up, we've got experience this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we're gonna
It's gonna begin here.
I guess we can do a roll call.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to City of South Fulton's Envision South Fulton retreat for training. Mr. Adams, would you please call the roll?
It's a roll call for the March 13th authority training. Honorable Mark Baker, Chairman.
Present.
Vice Chairman Jamal Grooms.
Present.
Secretary Treasurer Arnold Jiggets. Director Thant Coleman. Director Alicia Ivy.
Present.
Director Mercedes Miller.
Present.
Director Andrew Pearson.
Present.
Director Derek Pollard.
Present.
Director Rick Ross.
Present.
Mr. Chairman and directors, you have a quorum. The first item is the presentation by Attorney Michael Huning with Venture Denmark, Government Development Authorities Law and Local Area Authorities at a Glance.
Good morning, everyone. You guys hear me there on live on the virtual?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Hey, as mentioned, my name is Michael Huning with the law firm Fincher Denmark. Here to kind of just give you, at this point, just an overview, what the law statutory says about the Development Authority. Now, I'm sure with some of these board members and ones that have been here a bit longer, you already heard these and read through these, but it's kind of just a good update for the newer ones and just in general, just to know kind of where the state of the law is at and what we're looking to do with these development authorities. So as mentioned, the Development Authority is provided by statutory in the Code of Georgia. And it kind of gives it their, you have to govern the authority through that different way. So you have the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of Georgia, filed down by the Code Law of Georgia, and that goes down to local governing ordinances and laws, down to the bylaws for the Development Authority. All of these kind of play together in a mixture, and it kind of gives you what you're allowed to do and how you have to act as this public corporation under the law. So we go to the next one.
Could you speak up just a little bit, sir?
Yes, maybe I could probably bring this mic a little bit closer too. I don't know if the mask has anything to.
That's a lot better.
That's better there. Okay, I
Yes.
think I just changed the direction. All right, so being a public corporation, you're kind of held to certain laws that not all other corporations have, and so some of these other ones are. If you go to the next one, yeah, you have to be under the reporting of the public benefit law. These are all subject to Open Meetings Act, Open Records Act, and as well as the directors and other members are subject to the state code of ethics. And I'll go through the code of ethics a little bit later in a different slide, but that just kind of governs how the directors are to operate and the position on this development authority. All right, so the city of South Portland activated its development authority back in 2019. As mentioned, all municipalities and counties do have just by way a development authority, but it has to be activated in order to start actually engaging or in conducting business on its own. So that happened in 2019 with the original state of board of directors who were appointed to terms and currently.
I'm sorry. I know we do have a director with a hand up, and it may be because they can't hear you, but I want to give her a moment. But if possible, I know if everybody else is okay, this was remote. Maybe he could speak without his mask, so it won't be as muffled. If you're comfortable with that. No.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, I'm kind of
I'm saying
next to you, but
yeah, like because
yeah,
they probably can't hear you. Like I hear you, but it's still not super clear.
gotcha.
So I can only imagine what it's like for them. But the director, Ivy, you have the floor if you had something other than.
Thank you so much. That was the concern. I could not hear. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Sorry for that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try that. Let me know if that sounds better. Just a thumbs up or shake of the head.
That's better.
All right. Yeah, these masks kind of get in the way of all sorts of things, but trying to be safe as possible. Okay, so I think if you go back to one slide. Okay, yeah. So this is just kind of going back to what was just mentioned. When the city of South Fulton activated it, the development authority for the city then became live and could start engaging and conducting business as it sees fit. And so with that, there's, a set of bylaws to be adopted. And later on, you'll have another presentation explaining the bylaws a little bit more. That just kind of establishes the procedure for voting and setting policy and agenda and setting forth basically the direction the development authority wants to go to conduct the business it wants to conduct. And likewise, as mentioned, part of this is that the board of directors, for South Fulton now will set the policy and trying to engage in the business as it wants to see and what direction it wants to take the city or the development authority. Yeah, next one. Yeah. So as with that, you have your board of directors kind of at the top. And then through there, there's established a set of officers, the chairman, the secretary, and all the rest going through there. Then the development authority also is allowed to engage its own staff, provide for its own attorney, and then hire other professionals as it sees it might need. And these might be, finance consultants or engineers for particular projects or potential marketing or some other and get people to kind of give them, okay, we want to set this task and we need to maybe hire some of these people or employ our own staff in order to engage in this and get that thing done. All right, so like I said, the development authority is from statute. So 3662.4, the Georgia Code, kind of gives the creation of the development authority, and that's followed by then the directors. And you'll see there kind of list the qualifications for directors, the officers, compensation, expenses, bylaws, powers, what they're allowed to do. And for each county municipality, the directors shall be taxpayers residing in that same municipality or county for which there being a development authority. And then through a series of elections, then that development authority will elect its own chairperson, secretary, and other officers that it deems it needs necessary to conduct its own business. And then, as noted down there, the director shall receive no compensation for their services, but they can be reimbursed for actual expenses performed in their duties in accordance with their meetings or other business they engage in order to conduct the business on behalf of the development authority. All right, and so bylaws and regulations, they're not uniform across all development authorities. There is some, I guess, leeway. So you kind of go through that. There's a set standard of kind of things you need to hit, but you can go through that and craft it to a way that it makes sense for your local development authority, in this case, the city of South Fulton. And then, as I mentioned up above, as a director of the development authority, you are subject to the state code of ethics. And that just kind of, in general, it just covers, it's not really specific, but it's the whole spirit of ethics. And so a few of them are down there, you swear kind of to uphold the laws of the state of Georgia, of the local municipality that activated you. If you see corruption, you are to expose it and, do away with it in a manner that you can. And probably more particular with this is, as you kind of are in a seat of power in steering and engaging business and seeking potential deals and development throughout the city, engaging with private corporations for development of various, could be hotels or arenas or just anything that you're going to do. You have to be clear that, one, you're not using your position to increase your personal gain or that of any of your family members or anybody. You also don't want to discriminate against any or providing special favors to one group over another, or a friend or somebody else that's not in accordance with the general code of ethics of the state of Georgia. And lastly, particularly if you do know that you have an interest, a monetary interest in particular, in any potential deal that's coming before the development authority or any person who's engaging with the development authority, you cannot take official action regarding that particular matter because you kind of are conflicted out by conflict of interest. So you just want to take caution that when you're engaging or seeking new business, you are, aware of that. And if you do have any, interest in it, you make that known, and then you can sit out of any votes on that or anything like that in order to be sure that you're not given any, influence of impropriety or anything like that. All right, now we're just kind of getting to why are you director of the development authority? What are you engaged to do? And so the Georgia Constitution kind of lays it out that you are to kind of promote the development of trade, commerce, industry, and employment opportunities within your within your jurisdiction, which with the city of South Fulton, unless you get into any joint agreements with another development authority, you're kind of restricted to the jurisdiction that the city of South Fulton limits. But in doing that, though, it's kind of, as you can see, kind of a broad stroke of what you're engaged to do. But primarily, and we'll talk about this too a little bit later, is these the development authority's kind of purpose is for a private entity to take over and manage a project in order to get to this trade, commerce, development, and industry. And so, as I'll discuss a little bit later, but there were some cases earlier on in Georgia law where some of the development authorities tried to engage in, strictly public development, and these would be maybe a city hall or something. And that was found that it has to be at least a mixed use between public and private benefit, or private benefit, in order to, satisfy what the statutory requirements for the development authority states and lays out. And so to do that, there's a list under OCGA 3662-6 that provides you with all your powers. I think there's somewhere around 18 or 20 powers. These are just some of them on what the development authority can do. And so you'll see, start with the power to bring and defend actions that it engages in. And here's probably one that's, going to be important going on is, to make or execute contracts or other instruments necessary to exercise the powers of authority. So these will be particular. They could be intergovernmental agreements between other public corporations or legal entities such as municipalities or cities, and they can be with private organizations down to particular even individual persons that if you're in a small business type program or something, you can engage in that. But you want to be able to be clear of that, and that's why the Development Authority has provided, to have power to have its own attorney to review these contracts, and when they're engaged, to be sure that they are, tilted in favor or covering the interest of the Development Authority when they're engaging on these. And another presenter today will further discuss the bonds and some of the financing pieces to this. And so that'll be delved into a little bit further to show how you can get through that. But you have the power to enter into these contracts agreements. You can receive, administer grants to any property. You can acquire real property, dispense of it, sell, lease, transfer, dispose of real property Development Authority owns. And there's a couple later on projects I'll highlight that show kind of what that looks like. And then, as mentioned before too, as well, you can, appoint officers and retain any agents, engineers, attorneys, employers that you need and provide for their compensation. Yes, got a question.
Question, and not to nitpick, but paying attention to the words. You called out specifically real property in a couple instances, and then you called out property. So again, we've got the ability to receive, administer grants and devices of any property. So that would include chattel.
Yeah, there's real property and personal property. And so as
Not
engaged.
necessarily personal property, but chattel, just property that is real estate.
Right, and that's, so the code, says personal property, but that's the intent is it's not real estate, it's other property. So yes. And then kind of a catch-all is the last thing is just kind of do anything that's necessary or convenient in order to carry out the powers granted to the Development Authority pursuant to this chapter. Now, of course, it has to not be anything in violation of the code section, but that's just kind of generally providing that it's not prescribed in the a listed out group of powers, that this is kind of something that you can go into this direction if it's not listed out, and to the extent that it doesn't violate this Constitution or local ordinance, you can do that necessary to conduct the business you need to conduct. All right, so now this kind of just pulls us into a little bit of some of the constraints that the Development Authority has provided by law. And so, as I was talking about just a second ago, this section here just highlights that no project required under this chapter can be operated by the authority or by the municipality that activated the authority. And that's where, and you'll get a better picture of that when the bond presenter comes out, because it's a exchange of title and bonds and leasing of the property and managing the property. And basically it's a way that if the city couldn't do it, this is why developments were created, development authorities, because local governments or counties couldn't outdo this by Constitution. So the Georgia Code created these development authorities to kind of give a little bit more leeway to allow for some of these public private partnerships so that they can get this development going forward. And that's just a follow-up of that code section there, just providing more restraints or qualifications on any of the projects, the leasing of the property and things like that will be spelled out in detail. And then now we're moving into kind of, this kind of goes along with the open meetings and open records, that in Georgia, there's a public works construction law that says that any development that you're trying to engage in that's going to be greater than 100,000, it needs to adhere to the public requirements for that. So that's, public bidding requirements. It's advertising it out in the way it's mannered. So it's, if it's 15 days, 30 days out, however that is laid out. And then you also have to, make sure that the bids are in accordance with the public bidding. So that's sealed bids and proposals and how you're putting that out there. So it's making sure that the package or the project you want to do is, specifically laid out and spelled out and then presented to the public so that anybody who wants to can engage and create a bid package to submit for consideration to be that vendor or that individual or entity that wants to win that to conduct the business. And here's where I was going with earlier too. So these are a couple of cases from the early 80s that kind of, this is where we got, there, in the history of this, there, before the statutory development authorities, it was all constitutional development authorities, and they were kind of by local constitution or the other engaged, but your development authority is going to be a statutory development authority. And these cases just kind of highlight that in that first case, in Odom, Georgia Supreme case, the city engaged to its development authority, they wanted to build a city hall, kind of like a sheriff's office and a jail. And that was challenged because it was solely just public benefit, which was going to get the revenue from, or the benefits of that project. And so later on in the Nations One case, you know, they took about that, and you'll see, you know, improved city streets. So all good things, and benefits to the public. And, you know, the city at that time argued that, you know, in doing these things, well, it does maybe promote tourism or, you know, economic development or employment opportunities, particularly maybe you can argue the city streets. But in evaluating the code section of statutory law, you'll see that it ended with, as long, it needs to be some mix of both public and private, or at least private. It can't be solely public through this development authority, because that's, you know, the city has their own mechanisms and sections of law that they can perform these types of public only benefits. So for a development authority, and the way it was constructed, it's the idea that it's this public partner private mixture, and that's what it's intended for. So the projects completed or sought to engage in have to be a mix of public, private, or private in its kind of end scope. And this is just to clarify for development authorities that only one member of the local governing authority can be appointed as director, and this Councilmember Baker is that. And everyone else has to just fit the other qualifications that's mentioned before of being a taxpayer residing in the city and whatnot. Here's just some more case law that I kind of mentioned above, and just describing of what can be done. And again, it's just this whole idea. I mean, it's kind of a large scope just to promote industry, engage in economic employment or opportunities for your local jurisdiction. Yeah.
Is there any particular place a project is defined?
There are some, yeah, in there, and it's kind of expansive.
I only ask because as I read this with my business definition of a project, that makes no sense to me. So I'm trying to understand again how, for the purposes of the development authority, a project is defined.
Okay. So what's not making, you're saying?
Well, a project for me is an initiative with a beginning and an end. It's project, right?
Okay.
If it doesn't have a beginning and an end, then it's ongoing operation, right? We make shoes. We make shoes every day. So making shoes isn't a project. If I wanted to work with Mark, though, to develop a new shoe, right? So we're starting work on the design for a new shoe. Maybe that lasts 6 months. There's tons of things to do. Finally, the new shoe is approved, for example. Boom, the project's over, and we start manufacture of that project, right? So again, it's an initiative that has a beginning and an end with a special purpose. You said the development authority cannot own a project. So the development authority can't initiate action to do something, right? Whether it's build a building, a hotel, or
Yeah, they can't, yeah, manage that project. So they can start the concept of it and engage in and get the receptive private entities, and then that's where you'll that'll be a little more clear, I think, in the bond section of how that title and land swap goes. But essentially, it's management of the project that was initiated by the policies and that the development authority took to engage. As they say, okay, we want to say construct this It's down the way we could talk about now, but like the Avalon up in Alpharetta is a Fulton County Development Authority had that property, and they kind of gave the land and allowed for this developer to come in, and they also engaged the city to do this mixed kind of convention center that the city owned or operated, or it had power to, but it was built and operated by the hotel owner. So it's the project is a term, and I think I hear what you're saying, but it's expansive because there's loan programs that other development authorities do, and it's not really have a beginning or end point to that, but I guess it can just hit a project that the development authority got off the ground.
But you said the development authority cannot own the project. I could understand if the development authority can't own the hotel and can't run the hotel from day to day, right? The development authority can't do that, right? There's a new Hilton or a new whatever it is that's coming. We can't own the hotel and operate the hotel on a daily basis. But again, you used an example that the development authority says, we'd really like a hotel in this particular section. We'll engage some private folks, you know, and judge their interest.
You said initiate the
Exactly.
project. That's what you meant, but at the
But
same
you said
time,
you can't own a project.
right, but I think that you have a definition of what a project is.
That's
that-
why I asked
that it has to,
the
that it has to
definition of
fit. Like, and if it doesn't fit there, then, you know, it's not the same. But I think, and I wrote this down, and I wanted to ask you at the beginning, because I had a question regarding the public-private relationship. And now, I think later on, as you continue to explain, would you want us to interrupt and keep going? I'm asking you, because I just wrote mine down because I'm used to just asking questions when everything is over. Would you rather we interrupt when we have questions, or can we just write down? and
Yeah,
ask
I
them
think,
again?
I mean,
Just for the sake of you.
I have some time at the end for kind of questions,
Okay.
and we can talk, and if it's not like explained through the entirety, but I mean, I'm happy to field questions too in the
Yeah, but since
interim.
we've already started
Yeah,
engaging, let's
if you're getting there.
wrap this one, and then we'll just write down our questions and continue at the end.
Right.
But I think, I wanted to chime because that was one of the things that I wrote down. The relationship is, I don't know if it matters who initiates it, but when it's going on, it can't just have a public, it has to have the amalgamation of a public and a private use when it comes to fruition. That's what we said.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily matter saying, okay, with the development authority, there's a desire, we want to do this. If that is the case, I think that just like most things in the city, we would probably let people know when they can come, and then they would present, and then we would make a decision.
I got you. So the understanding of owning a project means the development authority can't act alone. They must engage a non-public entity
it has to be
get
both.
something done.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's
That's the
that they
definition
engage
of
in
owning
there.
a project. And that-
Okay, yeah.
was
And
my
that was
next question.
on the other slide, with ODAC.
Yeah.
That's what that was defined as on ODAC.
Right, because in that case, it was just a city hall and a jail and some public streets. And so that would have been operated and controlled and probably built by the city. And so they're saying in that case, that can't occur. And well, I can just read it off here.
Owning the project. They
Yeah,
must
so
engage the private
36,
Because municipalities have their own resources, and they got these certain things, and that would be kind of like using it as a divider.
right, yeah, because in that case, municipality could do all that without the development authority. So the purpose of the development authority is kind of in this space where the municipality can't do this because it's prohibited by law or just their powers. The development authority is kind of, that's why it's created, to engage in this kind of gray area and engage some of these private entities.
I think most presenters who come before us have said it oftentimes, that the development authority is a tool in the toolbox of economic development that a municipality may use. Sure.
Right. Yeah, and there's a whole host of authorities, the housing authority, downtown development authority, urban redevelopment authority, and they're all kind of similar in what their kind of basis is, but they have particular and primary functions, and they're kind of siloed into those.
But as well, on the Odom case, it says DDA, and I think for a lot of us, we would like to get that clarity at the end of when we're done with the presentation.
Of DD. Yeah, so
Because it's downtown.
yeah, and that was actually a downtown development authority. And so that's kind of like, they're kind of all in the same family, the authorities.
Right,
And so,
we just established a DDA recently in our municipality. So the differences will probably come up as a question.
yeah.
To be clarified as well as far as the power of both of those bodies.
Okay. Well, that one I could probably just handle now. It's the downtown development. The difference solely is their scope. They have to have an established area of where they can practice their authority, and that's usually the downtown core. Where the development authority, by large, encompasses the entire area of the county municipality in which it's in, and actually can go outside that municipality or county if like Atlanta is part in DeKalb and part in Fulton. So Atlanta Development Authority can go into the part of Atlanta that's in DeKalb. Or if, say the city of South Fulton engages with a nearby development authority, then that becomes now the two. You can do things for both of the jurisdictions you're in if you have that agreement. So I think, a lot of the authorities.
Simply the defined term, and I think you sent that out to all the directors, Attorney Walker, correct? Or I think we should.
But that would go under the IGA, and then governmental between two different authorities.
That would be if we had to do something, say, our municipality neighbors 5 different municipalities. So if we wanted to do something in conjunction with Fairwood, we share the real estate there, and, we would probably have some sort of.
It's only actually with the shared real estate.
Well, I would think that that's the only case that we can do.
Their shared real estate. Where the city and the county and share real estate.
Yeah.
Or 2 municipalities.
Yeah, it'll come up later too, that you can enter in joint agreements with other development authorities. But they're nearby neighboring, and then.
Now, what if they don't actually touch, like even though we touch several municipalities, what if there's a project that's close to my border, like my district in particular, I'm entering into an IGA in Fairburn for a road deal because my constituents are nearby. How far, just because of, the light use or the potential of it being a benefit to my constituents, how can we share a project?
Well, the city of South Fulton borders Fairborn. Right. Yeah, so in development authorities that touch your jurisdiction are ones that can be intergovernmental agreements that you can enter into kind of joint.
But even if, say, the development is not on the border of my jurisdiction, but like say, does it have to actually be right there on the border, or?
I guess you're talking about your jurisdiction as a
council municipality.
Oh, yeah, as a municipality. So yeah, if it borders and is nearby, because I think you're saying because some of the lines are drawn.
Right. I'm saying, say Fairburn has a project that's going to benefit the city of South Fulton because it's on the same street.
Right.
However, the border is right here. The project is right here and our municipality is here. Could we be a part of a project like that?
Well, you would have to have entered into an agreement with the Fairborn Development Agency.
Now, would that be a development authority to development?
Yeah, that's kind of like a joint development authority. But in doing that, you're going to, there's going to be the agreement we drafted, but they're going to basically either blend in or you're going to start to lose some of your singularity, I guess, in what you do. But it gets you over into different nearby things.
If we're losing something, you're saying, so it has a border.
Well, you then become a joint developmental authorities. And so now you're into kind of a shared relationship.
But I think the gap on what Mark may be asking, listening to the two of you, the gap on what he's asking and what you're answering. Say, for example, this large line on the table is the border between the two governmental agencies. Mark says there's an initiative that's going to take place in the middle of the city, for example. Can that be done, or must it be something that physically overlaps borders? You're going to build a hotel across 2 municipalities and borders. Mark's saying, well, no, it doesn't cross there, it's over here. But if there's some beneficial relationship, can they enter into that with an IGA? Is that a better example?
Yeah, he did. He answered 2 questions, but that was my initial
Okay.
question. So you answered yes, if there's gonna be shared space, I see Director Pierce, then that's the case, but at the same time, I'm saying if it's the shared purpose of something that may be close by, even if it's in a neighboring municipality, and that's what he just explained
Okay.
earlier.
So, and I'm trying to be sure I'm hearing you correct. So you're just saying maybe there's no agreement between Fairburn Development Authority and South Fulton, right? But they're doing a project that's nearby. You're asking if we can, or your development authority can assist, or
Must we, because there's can and must we assist?
I don't think we would have to, but if it's I guess what I'm saying is, if there are contributing benefits to our municipality, and they're gonna put a mall right there. And even though our borders end right here, but the mall will be further down the block,
okay.
for example.
And so
Could
and I
we get into an agreement if they needed help as authorities through an IGA to work on the project that would probably sit in their municipality property?
Right, and so that, I think that comes back to just, it goes up a level, and if you want to enter into a joint operational development authorities, that once you enter into that, each authority then jurisdiction is the entire jurisdiction of Fairburn and South Fulton in this example. So you're doing it up here, if it's one project that kind of sparks, maybe we want to join you, it's a larger meshing of the two authorities. And then once you do that, you have jurisdiction in both places.
Is that lawful?
I mean, yeah, it's a joint, it's a joint development authority. Yeah.
It might be some other document, but we could agree to do whatever it is, right?
So I'll give you a good example of it.
They're both extensions of the municipality, so you have to have something.
So it would be that. I can give you a perfect example. South Fulton wants to build a zoo. Okay, Fairburn wants to build a zoo. If we both build zoos, that's just ridiculous. All right, we'll build the zoo in the city of South Fulton. We'll say to Fairburn, listen, we want you to also promote this to your people. South Fulton's people get a discount at the zoo. We want you to promote it to all the Fairburn folks. We'll make some sort of agreement for a revenue share. You promote it to your people. They also get the discount. Whatever. Again, there's a revenue share. Would an IGA be the mechanism to sort of create that agreement? Our city border, the project is squarely within ours, but again, there's a give and take here. There's going to be a revenue share. Would that lend itself to an IGA? Does that make sense?
An IGA or MOU?
Right.
Yeah, and I think that may be something that is outside of what I'm talking about with the joint development. Because when you're joint development authority, you become like Athens, Clark County. They were Athens and Clark, and then they became Athens, Clark. So if you're going to be a joint relationship with another development authority, you kind of do more of that. Now, if you're trying to just say we're doing, yeah, but so if you're trying to do one specific project and you say, hey, it doesn't make sense for us to do this because we're so close, I think that's a separate kind of agreement or deal than a joint development authority.
When you say separate, what do you mean?
Small head.
I mean, I would have to, to get into more specific of that, what that would look like, but that may be, I mean, that sounds like there's other avenues where you could do that and engage in that. I mean, that could be city to city, kind of an understanding or something. But I think what I'm just talking about with your jurisdiction is right now, the South Fulton Development Authority jurisdiction is the city of South Fulton. That's only where it can be.
I think our question got a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think it's going down,
I
but.
do understand what you said initially, as far as, the boundaries of the DDA and the DA. But I think we just opened up something else. But I do want to get to the bottom of it because it's a question that I've never even considered. I want to acknowledge Pearson, Groves, and then Jiggly.
So my question was more related to using Dan's example. If we're building something here, this is our line of demarcation between the authority. I don't think we have to enter into anything because we're not in their land. But the question is, if there is a road that needs to be developed from an ingress and egress perspective that does encroach upon there, how do we look at
So an example, a road,
So we
would
build a
need it
hotel
because-
here,
okay.
we're in our jurisdiction. But we know in order to facilitate this hotel, use your example, a road must be built for an ingress that does go into their city. Is that where we maybe need to enter into an IGA or something, some kind of joint? 'Cause without that road, we cannot build this hotel.
Right, but we wouldn't be
That might
engaged.
be a municipality.
Yeah, you wouldn't be engaging the development authority. You're just saying our development authority is looking to do this project, and as a condition or that needs to be done, a road or something needs to encroach or be built or expanded that's on your property. And I think, yeah, that would then take it to a higher level than just like, because it's not really part of the project. It's just it's a fallout from the project. Because we're building this, it's more traffic, more capacity. We need to increase the roads. And that's just maybe a larger concept. I mean, that might be involved state, DOT, but that's, other agreements that maybe the municipality can do to get
But
through.
even in that example, it's not a true road, but just a driveway. I mean, it's literally right at the road.
But it
So
doesn't-
let me, can I give you guys an example that I think kind of goes directly to what your question is? It sounds like your question is if the property is not adjacent. Because if it's adjacent, then obviously you know that you're gonna
Sure.
benefit. But if you have property that's not adjacent, it's a little bit off and you want to make some connection where it benefits both authorities, can you legally do that? If the entirety of the project is going to be in another jurisdiction. So I think an example of that is the city, is actually Miller. She's the director of the GICC. So that is a perfect example of that. And that is a project that is within College Park, but there was coordination with the city of Atlanta as well as MARTA to collaborate and say, if our development authority solicits this, brings this, entity here, will you help the benefit? Will everyone work together to help the benefit of each jurisdiction? So Atlanta is not adjacent to the GICC, but they were able to work out agreements and collaborate to create a MARTA system that would connect the two jurisdictions. And that would be similar to
Even the road.
Director Pearson, road
Yeah.
example. So that
So there had to be an IGA in place.
well, I don't know if they expressly put an IGA in place, but I do know that it required the consent and the collaboration of Atlanta because they are connecting the GICC to the Atlanta airport, which Atlanta owns and operates. And you just can't do that without Atlanta's consent. So whether they formalized it in the form of an IGA, I don't know if it got to that point. It could have just been a MARTA meeting where there were College Park participants, Atlanta participants, and they said, this is what we're conceptualizing. Will you consent to this? But it did require the collaboration of all those different government entities to bring that to fruition.
So essentially, again, it might be an IGA, it might be some other mechanism, but we need the consent nonetheless.
Correct.
Director Pierce,
I'm good.
okay, you good. Okay, we have,
Yeah, one.
Director Grooms.
So thank you for acknowledging me. I just wanted to echo your sentiments earlier about reserving questions to the end of the presentation, because for those of us that are remote, we tend to lose about, 20 to 30% of your dialogue because you're a little bit muffled and there's a slight bit of an echo because of the room. So it would be better for us if you reserve your questions to the end. Just my comments. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Director Grooms, your point is taken. We're just gonna finish this one off, and then we're gonna do all of the rest at the end of all presentations for the rest of the day. You're exactly right. Director Jennings, if you could, try to project a little bit more, but I know that you have a question.
I yield. I was only gonna ask that we recognize Madam Attorney as she could give insight on this matter. She was trying to get in.
All right, so we good. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see where we're at. Yeah, so I think that just, to bring us back to one more down, one more. Yeah, this was just, I think what started it all was just trying to explain, where the development authority has power and what it can do. And the last one you see there, you could seek to, get in a joint development with a nearby one. And then that would allow just, you would expand your jurisdiction. I think we talked about some other examples with that too, but that's just kind of right for now, Development Authority, your jurisdiction is City of South Fulton. But those other agreements, yeah, you can engage in larger conversations with different government-owned entities in order to get things approved and on the way. All right. And so also for the directors of the authority, there's no, statutory provision for removal. In addition to the bylaws cannot provide for that. However, it should be noted, as mentioned with the code of ethics, violations of that could potentially lead to removal by governor, depending on those. So you just want to be clear of those, code sections and code of ethics and make sure that all the directors are operating ethically and in accordance with governing law. And this is just kind of a larger scope of, I think we kind of divulge into this a little bit with some examples, but just as you likely know, there's multitude of different developmental authorities, governmental agencies, the state, the county board, and all of these kind of have some relationship, and there's always need to engage with or confirm or to be sure that all affected stakeholders in any particular project, if it's wherever it is or who they're operating with, particularly it comes up if it is something that, it has to improve the roadways or something, Department of Transportation usually will have some input as well. It's just, in this whole relationship between all the local governments and the state agencies that are effective depending on what you're trying to do. And it's particularly, with developing anything, there's environmental concerns engaged with that, state, federal, different things that all have to be brought up and considered when doing particular projects, depending on what they are. And this just kind of gets into, because the Development Authority, is its own separate entity, it can enter into multi-year contracts with cities or counties for different services. So in the Georgia Constitution, there's certain parameters for intergovernment agreements, but basically it's just saying that you can enter into agreements or contracts with different government entities, and there is a limit of 50 years, excuse me, in which you can engage in. And this is a little bit different because for local counties and municipalities, they're all largely governed by the 1 year, or they cannot bind, their authorities or their governing body year after year to something different. So this allows for, between governmental entities or quasi-governmental entities, the opportunity and the law to engage with them. And so you can get things done with other government agencies and go beyond the term. So that's, kind of combines their successors through these IGAs with the development authorities for a term up to 50 years. And now just have there's a couple of particular projects that other development authorities can do, just to give you some ideas of what's going on. I think we had a question maybe a year ago from this authority or something, basically on, we all know, the large scale projects or different things, but there's a whole host of different initiatives that a development authority can look into. And one of these here is that Invest Atlanta, which is Atlanta's development authority. They have a community loan fund. And so it's aimed to help small and micro businesses. And I think, if I remember from here, it's even gauged down to about $5,000 or less is the loan. And this is for like things like maybe like your King of Pops or, local street vendors or food trucks. These are small businesses that you maybe don't often think about, but they still would engage employment opportunities and commerce in your jurisdictional area. And so, this particular one, gives certain loans or capital, addresses most low-cost options of capital investment that maybe are not available to small businesses without, some kind of track record for another loan institution to give them some. So the development authority may, consider, okay, well, we want to create something that makes it a little bit easier for those who aren't typically the type of individual person that gets loans, we want to set up some kind of program to give them an avenue to seek some of that funding that they maybe are denied with. And so currently, like, this is just an example of what they have for a term. So they offer, 3% fixed rate and a deferment period. They set some mandatory or maximum amounts for loans. And it's just engaged like this particular program. Like I said, they have a few, but this one just engaged for small businesses and has certain parameters and terms. So that's just another idea. And then, as I brought before, the Avalon up in Alpharetta. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. If not, I can go to the next slide, Corey. It's kind of this mixed-use development with hotels, restaurants, apartments up in the city of Alpharetta. And so the inception kind of for this, the land was held by the Development Authority for Fulton County. So they already had this property. That's where they engaged in this master agreement with Avalon North LLC. And through that, they also worked with the city of Alpharetta to develop kind of this mixed-use city-owned conference center within the privately owned. So that's where you get this public-private kind of relationship. And as long as you have both of that going on, you can, seek to ways to benefit the city as well as the private thing with it. And again, the whole idea is to promote the trade, commerce, and employment opportunities. And just bonds in general is a large way in which they finance these projects, but that'll be talking a little bit more detail by the next presenter. And then we're going to end with just kind of the opportunity what the law provides for dissolution. So if you go one more, Corey. So the local authority that activated the development authority can dissolve it so long as certain parameters are met. But one of them, though, if the authority does have any outstanding unpaid bonds or whatever, they cannot be dissolved until those bonds are properly retired or handled in accordance with the terms of that agreement. And then if it does come to a point where it is dissolved, all the assets, debts, rights, and obligations would then transfer over to the parent county, municipality, corporation that activated the development authority itself. So that kind of just concludes my overview presentation of this. And so now I think, we'll probably have a couple questions I see here down. And for those virtual, I guess the same way, just raise your hand on there and be acknowledged by the chairperson.
Okay, so thank you for your presentation. I don't know, clerk, I know Director Coleman had something because I saw it in motion and reacted to what he said to the last meeting. You want to go ahead?
No, I answered it in my head.
I want to know what your answer was because it was on the same thing.
Well, I looked at it, he immediately said that Alpharetta had a city-owned conference center. That's what, and then they own the private. But yes, it was in conjunction with, right, they didn't wholly own it, depending upon how you define it, because there was a commercially owned hotel label tax.
So it was private. So it was private.
It was on the property. So correct. Yeah, that was it.
Okay. We have Mr. Miller. Okay.
I heard you all talking earlier about the understanding of the convention center with Atlanta. Just some update. We have a IGA with the city of Atlanta for the SkyTrain. We have an MOU and a mixed-use development with the hotels that are around the convention center. It's a public-private partnership. So there's an MOU for them, and they get a tax abatement, and we have sort of like a HOA. So they have to pay into the maintenance of that property on a yearly basis, i.e. landscaping, water, power. They have to pay into those fees. The GICC is owned by the Business Industrial Development Authority, but the city of College Park does the day-to-day operations of the facility. I yield.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Miller. We have Director Pierce.
So, what would benefit us other than using his example, why would we want to partner with another municipality on a project? What are the benefits or what are the detractors if there is no common? Does that make sense? We don't have a common, so why would we want to?
So
Does the question make sense?
So the question asked was, well, help me if I'm paraphrasing correct, but what the benefit would be to enter an agreement with another developer that's doing a project.
Development authority.
Yeah.
doing a project. So we have a project they're not adjoining, they're close.
Mm.
So why would we want to partner with it?
I mean, I guess that's kind of, I mean, that's up to the development authority to decide. But what I think was getting at, and maybe where it's getting lost, is the joint development authorities, the way that that's kind of going is, well, that's just an example of two mergers, but two development authorities can join together. But the idea would be they're entering into this more, okay, we're going to be like more shared governing body for all our jurisdiction now. But if you have one particular project that another development authority is doing, that's not going to be a joint, not going to be considered a joint development authority cooperation, but you can, through system of different IGAs or understandings, figure out ways to help or coordinate with, but they'll be doing the project. They'll be ready. And so to the extent that you would want to be involved, I guess it just comes back to what would your jurisdiction get from this aid?
Because I get the conflict of interest you brought up. We want to build a zoo, they want to build a zoo. That's a conflict of interest just by spatial. But if it's just a project where we're building a hotel, they're not building a hotel, but that would make no sense for us either. Communicate with them or reach out to them, right?
Yeah, I mean, if like, I mean, the South Florida Development Authority, say, you guys want to try a mixed use, the hotel development thing.
Right.
And it's near wherever, College Park, or it's near Union City. You're going to do it because you decided as a director that this is what we want to do and here's what we're doing. Now, to the extent Union City says, well, we see some benefits near us, can we help you in any way, or can we do anything to facilitate this better? And then it'd just be a question of evaluating, well, what are you offering? And then this development authority will review that and say, okay, well, we maybe can see the benefit here, and maybe you can do something like this. And then it's like a separate intergovernmental agreement or some other MOU, but not necessarily, you're not joining the development authorities. You're just saying for this one project, there are some things that maybe you can do to help. And, to that extent, we'll welcome it, but this is going to be ours. And we're going to do it this way. But if you're find that you're always engaging with maybe the same development authority, then maybe it makes sense in its consideration. Well, maybe we want to just enter into like a merge and have a joint one. So now that we can do things in your district, you can do things in ours, and we can promote this area much better. But that's just, you evaluate them as they come. But yeah, so for particular projects, specific projects, evaluate how that may impact, what that will look like, and then you just kind of go with what's that look like, and then in coordination with the development authority attorney, you just kind of figure out what's the best way for us to be involved if we want to, or what's the best way to get them involved, but by keeping certain things we want to keep.
I want to go back to the owning of the project or business and just get absolute clarity. If for whatever reason the development authority decided if it had its own money or to use someone else's money, and we bought something, let's just say a parking garage or parking lot, and I just want to understand, can we or can we not, or is it not good practice or good practice if we bought a parking lot, right? And we hired a management company and we charge people to park in this parking lot, and the revenue from that parking lot went into our coffers. Could we or could we not do that? Good, bad practice, explain it.
I mean, that probably, because you're saying this is an already built parking.
I'm saying we have our own money.
But the parking garage is already built, and you just want to buy it from
Let's
somebody else.
say dilapidated, we identified as an opportunity to do good works in our community. We could afford to purchase it, or maybe an independent body for whatever reason loaned us the money or gave us the money to buy it. However, the point being is we operated through a management company, not us, not our staff, but a management company. We partner with them, hire them to come in, maybe we do a profit share. The parking garage, for the sake of the conversation, makes $1 million. Our agreement with the management company is they take 30%, we take 70%. Could we do that?
Okay, for that, I
Or
mean,
if,
in certain, yeah,
if Madam Attorney, you could apply, or if you know further, I would be open to hearing your opinion as well.
well, I mean, I guess you'd have to go back to the Development Authority's charge, and that's to promote commerce, engage in economic employment opportunities. So in that particular example, we'd have to see, well, does it fit that charge? Is buying a parking garage and then, keeping that, having someone manage it and then using the funds to finance other things for the Development Authority, does it fit that charge, one? And is that the intent of the statute for the Development Authority behind it? And so that I'd have to do a little bit, maybe deeper dive into that to see if that's something that would fit that and, respond to the statute, because a lot of it is you're developing new things for this larger or overscale, kind of thing, where the private company would take it or they manage it, and the funds. And that's, I mean, you might get a little bit more picture from the bond and how that works with the titles in the next presentation. But if it fit the charge of the Development Authority and was within the powers of what they can do, and is it good practice or not? I mean, it's a discussion for the directors at that time to figure out what that would look like and what that would mean for the Development Authority if that becomes something good. But it has to, I think, get a little bit more understanding of particular projects in that vein to further expound. But in general, yeah.
And I think,
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Attorney Beginning. You would have to obviously vet it through the statute, but just in general, I would say a situation where I could think with that, where that probably would work would be like an outlet mall. An outlet mall where you would be noticeably and obviously promoting commerce. And then you would own the parking facility. That arrangement would be similar to like a convention center, where you're promoting trade and commerce and you own a public portion of it, and then you have other private businesses that are involved in that. So like a collaboration for an outlet mall, I could see it potentially being an example of that, but then obviously you would still have to vet it, the specifics through the statute when you engage in that project.
And I'll add, and then I'll yield. I think the biggest takeaway, I mean, so if we're able to, and I'm not saying that we would ever want to engage in this type of operation, I just want to know, does that fall under our ability to operate? If we deem that maybe by owning this property or this particular, space or the property, and giving an example, if we lower the rate to the community, right, hence being a benefit to the public, and generating the revenue, that those are the things I was really trying to key in on, if those things were appropriate or not.
Right. Yeah, and I think, as Attorney Walker said, like, you can keep it, if the parking garage, the intent is to support a shopping center nearby, you're promoting commerce. And so that's the public benefit for the area, because you're generating revenue, you're bringing business in, you're increasing tax base. So whatever you do at the parking garage, I don't know if you have to, limit or reduce, the fee. I mean, the benefit is what it provides. It provides parking and places for people to come, and because they can come, now they can go to these shops. Where without this parking garage, there wasn't that opportunity. So now you're promoting people who come in, you're promoting commerce, you're engaging in employment opportunities because shops were now open or want to be there because you have parking, or you have this situation from Director Miller, it's near the airport, in an agreement where now MARTA sends over shuttles or something, so you can actually facilitate the movement of people to your convention center that you build. So there did be further, if more specifics when it comes, but I think as long as you're tying it back to your main mission to promote commerce, employment opportunities, there's not really necessarily like a confined things what you can do. Just as long as whatever you're doing relates back, or you can argue that it relates back, you may be able to, proceeding that, as long as it's not, further prohibited by the statute. But,
Is there a difference though in his question and how we're proceeding the answer? Meaning, the development authority says the parking lot here would, make tons of money, would generate revenue for the city, whatever else it is. Because that's the bottom line, right? Again, we want to make revenue for the city. We can use it for whatever purpose. And that was a beautiful example. So the development authority says, yes, we need a 4-story parking lot, whatever it is. We engage some commercial builder or whatever it is to build the parking lot because we can't build the parking lot. We're not a contractor. But the parking lot wouldn't be owned by the development authority. It would be owned by the city, which is not the development authority. Isn't there a distinction there? Because cities do own parking lots across America. Is that not the distinction? We could determine that the parking lot is worth building. There would be great ROI. We spur the project, right? We initiate it. We get a commercial builder to build this parking lot or whatever. But at the end, once it's done, the city owns it. The development authority does.
That's cheap.
But I mean, but the city owns the parking
Right,
lot.
but the point of the development authority is to have private entities come together with municipalities.
To own it in the end.
Right.
So basically, all right, I guess if there was a parking lot, the city would have to do it themselves, the development authority would be involved.
And the city can just do what they want to on their own.
Because they definitely own parking lots. I mean, cities definitely do that. I got it.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have anybody else?
yeah, anybody virtual questions or?
This is Alicia Ivy. Thank you. Thank you very much. Michael, first of all, it's a great presentation. I just have a very simple question, and it's with regard to air rights and also ground leasing rights with respect to the development authority. Can you talk a little bit about that? I've heard, throughout the presentation, but how do we as an authority deal with air rights in particular? Various reasons I'm asking that question, but you just kind of expound on that, please.
Okay, so air rights in the regard of
Real estate. So for example, I know that there are opportunities sometimes when various companies may want your airspace rights and different things of that nature. And I know that there may be an opportunity or down the timeline where people may actually want to do ground leases. So is that permissible? How does that work with authorities?
Okay, yeah, and I think and again, it might be something further research on, but with the ability to lease spaces, dispose of property in general, I think the development authorities would have the opportunity to explore, if some opportunity comes to them for air rights or ground rights or something beyond the normal, leasing of the land itself, certainly can be entertained. And as long as, you just, again, just check whatever the specific project is against the statute. I think in general, because, it provides for the lease and disposing of property to various entities, that's probably something that could be engaged with. Again, we'd have to, kind of is always on the specifics of whatever's being presented at the time as well, to be sure exactly what they're looking for, what you're looking to do, and to be sure. But I think in general, that could be something that, can be explored by the development authority.
So this would not exclude air rights and these rules and regulations, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's my question.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, I have a question. Okay, when the director talked about buying a parking lot and keeping those revenues, can we keep those revenues, or do they have to go back to the city or to some type of enterprise fund?
I think, it would maybe depend on how the financing of the property was, first commenced, and that's the agreement. But yeah.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
But yeah, the proceeds and the management, it's by the private entity. And it's, usually financed, and the way it's financed by bonds from the city and pay back of those. But yeah, so you were saying the specific with the parking lot, just keeping the fees from the people parking?
Right, when the director asked if you went into a public-private partnership and we wrote into the deal that we get to keep a portion of those fees. Do those fees go back to the city or do they have to be set up in some type of enterprise fund?
Well, let me ask you this, Director Miller, because I have not looked at the documentation for the GICC in a long time, but I do think that is a good example. From what I recall, just through my firm's participation with that project, I did not take the lead on that, but my firm did. So I have had the opportunity to look through the public documents on it. My understanding is that the initial plan was for the city to own the parking lot for the GICC and to recover and recoup those fees and to provide employees to manage the parking lot. So that's my understanding of the intent, and I just don't know now, is that the current setup for GICC or did that change?
You mean the parking deck in the back or the parking lot?
Well,
in the
both,
front?
because I think for legal purposes, they would be treated similar.
Well, the parking lot actually is owned by the Business Industrial Authority with the convention center. The parking deck in the back of the center is owned by the city of Atlanta.
Okay, and then the fees that are collected through the lot for the GIC.
From the lot are added as part of our revenues, just like our rental.
I'm sorry? You broke up.
I said the fees that we collect from the parking lot is part of the revenues, just like meeting room rental or any other ancillary fees. So they're not separate. They're all a part of the budgeting for the center.
Okay. So there is opportunity. It just depends. I think one of the difficulties you're going to have. So can a public entity, and so my understanding of what Chairman Baker is conveying.
Oh, no, it's totally different because they're in the 3P relationship. I think Director Jenkins' question was more aligned with if the city owns something, how can the development authority work with the proceeds going back to the city? And I think that's not something that the municipality is supposed to be a part of.
Correct. That's why I was asking, can the authority keep them or do they have to go back to the city or to an enterprise fund?
Right, but when you have that partnership, it's okay to generate revenue through that partnership, and whatever those agreements are, they would be subjected to it. Isn't that correct?
Yes, if you have a partnership, if you have a partnership, you can create a dynamic where the authority keeps the fees, but you have to think about whether the other entities are going to agree to that dynamic, because building a parking lot, maintaining a parking lot, that is a substantial cost. You have to get insurance, liability, it's an ongoing operation. So typically a development authority would not be in a position to even create, contract out, and manage that part of the project. So typically you would bring in a private party to manage it, or you would use the funds of the city who has a bigger pocket, which is what happened with the GICC. So you wouldn't typically see a development authority spending that much of their income for that purpose, for future investment purposes, but it is potentially allowable. It's not common, and obviously it'd be subject to whatever conditions of that setup would be, of that project.
Thank you.
I had Director Jenkins, and then we'll acknowledge you, Director Pollard.
So I don't know if this falls in the same pot or not, but I've done some research and invested in Atlanta. And as Attorney Michael had brought up about their small business program, I think that was I who had reached out to your firm about getting that information.
Yeah.
Hey, and in their, and this could be different, I don't know, but in their program, they actually generate revenue from their revolving loan program. So whereas they loan whatever amount of money out to small business owners, there's a percentage that small business owner pays back over a period of time. And that percentage goes back into specifically that program's budget, which is under Invest Atlanta, their development authority. And so they're able to constantly loan money because they're planting good seeds with business owners who in turn pay the money back, plus they pay interest. That interest is in essence revenue generated and profit to that particular program, again, which is a program under Invest Atlanta, their development authority. So my point here is saying that there seem to be instances, and again, I don't know if it's the same instance, but there is something that the authority controls, governs, it's their own, right? Meaning we've done enough projects, we have $30 million in our account, we decide to say we're gonna allot $10 million for our small business program. From that $10 million, we loan and seed that money out to small business owners. There are rules in place. Those business owners receive that money, they do good business, they pay that loan back, there's an interest. So not only did we get the $100,000 we gave to Joe Schmo Jim or whoever business owner, we in turn got our 10% back for the $100,000 we paid profit. So we got our money plus some, and then we're able to do more and seed more. So is that, I don't know if that's different or the same, or do y'all get my point? And I do know that to be kind of like that.
It's very deleted. That's a fact. Okay,
No, I was asking, brother Michael.
Yeah. You know, like,
it sounded more like a statement. I was listening.
Oh,
Sorry.
Well,
yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, I think in the slides I had, you know, they have a 3% interest. And so, yeah, so they get the funds back plus that 3%. I'm sure that would be used for management costs of the program itself too. But yeah, they can utilize that funds again. And as, you know, the money sitting in the bank is probably making interest too. So they're creating revenue. The development authority is creating revenue as well while that money's sitting there. That 30 million you said you had to make its own interest and if it's holding. So yeah, so you can generate revenue in those ways through different bond payments and things too. And there's other ways that you can try and get sources of funding throughout without just from the city that created. And so you can explore those options, and that's one of them I think that allows for that and kind of create. It's a self-sustaining program over time if that works like that as well.
You actually, Mr. Chairman. So I introduced that concept as a comparison to owning the lot and our ability to generate revenue. That's why I introduced it, not so much to explore that aspect of it, but just introduce it as the development authority having some vested stake in something and generating revenue from it, similar to the Invest Atlanta's small business program and how they generate revenue. It's the revenue generating part that I'm trying to hone in.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's all, you know, by situation, but maybe like with the other Avalon example, with the city having the convention center inside or the conference hall inside of the hotel, I'm sure that they probably work on some agreement where they get a portion of fees for that conference center to rent it out to other people. So I think there's ways that you explore that, but it's also, it's in those agreements with whoever you're partnering with. Do they want to agree to that? Because largely, you know, you're financing the project. They pay back the bonds, and once they pay back the bonds, and they take ownership of it. It's now, you know, you're not leased it, you're not renting it anymore. They take ownership. But you probably, you know, if you have add-ons for it, well, now it's yours because we did the issue title bond exchange, and now, you know, here's the title to the property because we paid back all the bonds. But our agreement has this lasting piece that says, you know, we maybe get a percentage of parking fees or conference hall fees. I mean, it just you work out in the agreement with whoever that is and should they agree to it? Because a lot of it, it's the first development authorities thing is we're going to finance or provide a way for you to finance these bonds. You build it, and then you pay us back. And once you pay us back, then it's yours, and they take it, and they take the profits and the things from that. But the city or the development authority gets all the ancillary benefits for having that project, the increased revenue, property values, taxes, things like that. But certainly with agreements, you could probably try and negotiate specific things to retain some of the actual project revenue or profits after the pilot should be.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna end with Director Pollard.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, Counselor. Thank you, Chairman Baker, for acknowledging me. From time to time, Counselor, we get an opportunity to contribute land to projects. And I want to piggyback on what Director Ivy had mentioned, or one of the subjects she had mentioned, which were ground leases. To the extent, could you just give us an idea as to what the pros and cons would be when we are contributing land to a project for entering into a ground lease situation versus a fee simple sale? So are there any benefits to a long-term ground lease? What are the benefits to the development authority for the different ways that we contribute land to a project?
So you're saying that if the project is we're giving land to a certain project, but retaining some kind of ground or releasing ground rights to somebody else, or
well, no. All I want to know is what would be the benefits to doing a fee simple sale, and then what are the benefits for entering into a long-term ground lease?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I guess that's just I believe they may just become project by project and what that looks like. But the developer coming in will probably, for them, a fee simple would be maybe more of what they're looking for, because we just want to know, we'll build this hotel mixed use development and we want to use your, ability to finance through bonds, and we'll pay you back over 20 years, but we want to control the property once that happens. And so you'd be, dealing with what does the project or the people seeking to, complete the project, what do they envision? And so it kind of goes, you take case by case, I would imagine, but to the extent that, you want to lease it and you retain some of that value, then, you explore that and be like, okay, maybe this makes more sense for us. And we were willing to lease this to you for this, but we don't want to give it up in complete control. So I think it just depends on how each one comes back to you and what it looks like and what the private developer or entity, their exploration is and what they want to see done. But I think, it's just kind of circumstantial as to if there's more benefits one way or the other, depending on what the project may or may not be.
Well, I think where I'm really going with this is, does it give us more control over the project if we have a long-term ground lease on it? The fact that the fee simple property would revert back to us over a period of time, it would seem to me that the municipality, the city of South Fulton, would benefit more from a ground lease. And I know each situation is probably different. Right. I recognize that, but I wanted the board to hear, what are the benefits to us for doing both types of transactions. For instance, a long-term ground lease, if it's a part of a bigger project and maybe something within the project scope went awry, do we have more control over the property versus just an outright sale to someone?
Right. Well, and I mean, I think, certainly that if you just do the fee simple, you're surrendering everything you have to it. So obviously retaining a lease, you will, just by the nature of what it is, retain some more control over that process. And so in exploring that, I mean, yeah, if you have the lease and you lend out the lease for so many years, and then it turns out that project that you leased it to didn't maybe amount to what we thought it would or what you thought it would. And so at that time, I mean, whenever that lease would end, you could, terminate the lease and then you still have the property. So the benefit would be, for a lease is you're retaining the property. You can incorporate a new project on top of that, or, maybe then sell that land off or, give it in exchange for the property. So between doing the two, I mean, yeah, in general, a lease, you will retain more control because you have certain rights while you do contract some away, the person, whatever interest they have. But I think those would be kind of your two, that if you keep the lease in it, you retain some control over that, and potentially, I mean, the property remains ultimately in the development authority, so you can dispose of that later on at a different date or do something different with it later on.
Okay, and that's what I wanted folks to hear.
All right, with that, we're gonna go ahead and speak.
Got 2 minutes up. I think Ms. Ivy has her hand raised.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say to our colleagues, our board colleagues, that the reason why I asked that question, and Director Pollitt was absolutely on point. I just wanted us to have a little bit of information and food for thought with regard to ground leases and also air rights as we move forward. And so I would like a consideration for more information for us just to have that in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Ivy. Thank you for your presentation. I think we'll go to the next time. I think at this point we have
Right.
we have working lunch.
Yeah. Yes, actually, the lunch is about 2 more minutes, but I think for those on the Zoom call, we can give them an opportunity to have a break and return at 11:45. Mr. Selby has arrived, and so 11:45, if everybody can return, we'll do a working lunch.
Director Miller, I thought DoorDash was coming to us.
I apologize.
We'll see you soon. Thank you.
12 noon? Yes, so directors on the Zoom call, if you could return at 12 noon, we will resume with the presentation by Attorney Selby. Thank you. I don't think so, NA.